Roostertail Talk, a podcast dedicated to everything related to the sport we all love, hydroplane racing. I'm your host, David Newton, and it's time once again, so sit back, relax, and welcome to Roostertail Talk. It is March 24th, 2020, and this is episode 27. Now, with Roostertail Talk, I want to talk to all people involved in this great sport from all different angles. Today's episode features an interview with Bob Sr. If you don't know Bob, he's been a fan of unlimited hydroplane racing since Seattle was introduced to this great sport in the early 1950s. He is a center for hydroplane memorabilia, a museum volunteer, hydro historian, and fan. Bob is always eager to talk boats, so let's listen in on our conversation. Well, I'm sitting down here at the Hydroplane and Raceboat Museum in Kent, Washington, sitting across the table from Bob Sr. Bob, how are you doing today?
I'm just fine, thank you.
All right, well, thanks for coming down here. I know you've got kind of the repertoire as the button guy around the hydroplane community, but you're also a big fan of the hydroplanes, and you've been around here for a little bit. So how did you get involved with the hydroplanes and get started?
Oh, David, I'm 82 years old, and we've had hydroplane racing in Seattle for 70 years this summer. I watched all of the Gold Cups on King Television in the 50s, and I got turned on to boat racing. It's so exciting. And I learned most of the owners and drivers and started following the history and going backwards, learning pre-Seattle history. Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating subject. I don't hunt, fish, golf, bowl, RV, or barbecue, and I couldn't put a Phillips head screwdriver in a Phillips head screw. I've just made hydroplanes a full-time hobby. I've been on the race committee at Seafair since 1964. I'm a board member here at the museum. I'm considered the hub of the wheel among the memorabilia collectors, and I've traveled out of state and probably seen about 150 unlimited races, and can't wait for more.
Well, yeah, I did run into you down at San Diego Bay Fair last year when you had some buttons down there.
Only missed 2 San Diego races ever. I went to Sacramento and Kelowna, BC in the 60s for 2 races.
Oh, okay.
I've only missed 1 race at Tri-Cities due to illness, although I was there.
Yeah.
But yeah, boats are magic. People are great. I've met 1,000 neat people, only a couple of dumbbells.
Well, you've been to a lot of races, and I'm just curious, as a fan, what are some of your favorite venues you've gone to?
Well, I
love Bay Fair. That's a great one to go to, but I haven't been as many as you have.
San Diego is a great race site for 2 reasons. The water is salt, of course, and the propeller gets a good bite, so the speeds are superior. And you're so close to the race course, you can almost shake hands with the driver in the outside lane. Yeah. It's a great venue.
Yeah. Any other favorites other than San Diego?
Well, I went to Madison and Detroit a couple of times, and Detroit is a rough race course, but it's the Yankee Stadium of boat racing. Yeah. And I have a special affection to Madison, Indiana, because in 1965, my buddy Roy Peterson and I went to the Diamond Cup, fans on the beach. I got my pocket notebook out, writing down qualifying speeds and talking to Bob Miller and Fred Alder and good stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And Miss Madison crew chief at the time, Graham Heath, said, "Hey, you're pretty hip on this. I'm supposed to phone the Madison Courier and give them a full report, but I got to put engines in the truck and I got to catch the red eye home. Here's the phone number. Would you please phone the Madison newspaper and report the 65 Diamond Cup?" I did, and the guy said, "Hey, you did a good job, better than those doggone mechanics." So he wrote a letter to Seafair and got me press credentials. So I've represented the Madison Courier at races out west since 1965. And in the olden days, I had to get up on Monday mornings at 5:30 a.m. and phone the sports editor. He wanted all 3 decimal points of every qualifying speed and lap speed. So
it was a long conversation then on the phone with that.
But I came with great affection for Miss Madison. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to 1971. Madison won the Gold Cup. Of course, everybody's seen Madison the movie. Well, I was there, and it was a big thrill to see the hometown boat come up with a Cinderella victory, and David slayed Goliath. Muncie broke a sponson and sank. Pan Pack and Budweiser had mechanical problems. And McCormick won the Gold Cup for the hometown crowd. So I've been a special fan of the Miss Madison team over the years.
Yeah, well, it's a very exciting win. Well, it sounds like you have some great memories of the sports and at the races. Do you have any other memories that stand out to you as a fan?
Well, when the double flip occurred at San Diego, and Circus and Miss Madison were vertical at the same time coming down the backstretch, it was pretty awesome.
That was right in front of the popular spectator crowd there.
It made a 6-photo sequence in the National Enquirer. And of course, when the Elam landed on top of the Miss Budweiser at Seafair, and Budweiser driver was Mark Webber, and he knew he was instantly in trouble and heading for the log boom, and had he not cranked it hard left, it might have been a disaster, a la Muncie sinking the Coast Guard picket boat in 1958.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy times at the races there. Well, I'm a fan of the sport just like you. I could talk about this for hours, but I'm just curious on growing up and being around the sport for so many years. It sounds like Miss Madison was your favorite team.
Oh yes.
Did you have any favorite drivers that stood out for you that you were a big fan of?
Well, back in the day, Myra Slovak became a favorite because it was a very glamorous story. I call him the original skyjacker. When he flew from communist Czechoslovakia to Berlin to freedom, came to America, got a job flying for Bill Boeing Jr. and then driving his hydroplane Miss Wahoo, winning national championships. That's a romantic story. And of course, there's a Myra Slovak book out on sale here at the museum gift shop, by the way. It's an excellent read.
Race to Freedom by David Williams.
Hoping to be turned into a theater film down the road.
Yeah. Well, I read that book, and it's a great read. It's a great book, but there was so much I didn't know about Myra until I read that book, and I kind of fell in love with him as a racer as well after reading that, because he was such a humanitarian and such a good person as well as a racer. Because talked about the stories about him trying to save lives. I think, was it Don Wilson in Washington D.C.? He tried to save from his crash, but he saved Bill, pulled him out of the water, and he was always about safety first and people first before the races.
Champion airplane racer too at Reno.
Yeah. So quite a hell of a racer and a hell of a person. Well, I know you're really about buttons, and you're really well known for buttons and memorabilia. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So how did your collection start, and when did it really become a hobby for you?
Well, before World War II, race sites like Red Bank, New Jersey, which hosted the National Sweepstakes Trophy, and President's Cup races on the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., they would use pinback buttons for pit access. Okay. And later the sport evolved into ribbons for pit access, and later paper pit passes in a glassine pin holder, and then metal pins, and then wristbands for pit access. Anyway, the pinback buttons were pre-war pit pass. And in 1954, the Shana family were racing Gale 4, and they ordered some 2 1/4 inch pinback buttons with the Gale 4 portrayed on it by a graphic artist, and the boat turned out pink, which I guess the artist thought was pretty snappy. And Lee Shana's mother, Millie Shana, said, "Why is that button pink? Our boat is lime green and mahogany, and it should have some water on it." So she hand painted some water on the bottom and then personalized them at the top with names of the family and the crew. And that pinback button actually became one of the icons and highest value collectibles. Well, anyway, come the mid-50s at Seattle, boats with commercial sponsors started making pinback buttons to give away to promote their brand, such as Bardol Oil Additives, Pay and Save Stores, thriftway grocery stores, etc. Some of the boat owners made buttons for souvenirs for their crew and their friends, such as the Maverick and the Shanty. So by the end of the 50s, the Pink Gale, the Shanty, and the Hawaii Kai were the three coveted top buttons. And my friend Roy Peterson started writing letters to mechanics and growing his collection, and other people got free buttons at the races, and it just became a fad. And the teams seemed to go out of their special way to make buttons to pass out at Seafair. Other races too, but especially at Seafair. And so I went over to Roy's home caring less about hydroplane buttons. I bought his old scrapbooks. And he gave me a Thriftway national champion button and said, "There, now you're a button collector." And I was hunting for old boating magazines at Pike Place Market, and I found a Bardol for sale for 2 bits. So I bought it. Now suddenly I'm a collector.
Okay. So you can blame your friend for this then?
Sure. Then in 1964, my buddy Les Bretthauer was going in the Navy. He had a cowboy hat loaded with old hydroplane buttons. And he had the Pink Gale, the Shanty, the Kai, and many, many others. And I bought it from him for $40 because he wanted to take his girlfriend to dinner at the Space Needle before he joined the service.
Okay.
And the buttons that were on that hat, for which I paid $40, probably worth about $2,000 now as values.
Yeah, I was wondering what the. So what year was that? I wonder what the.
I bought that in '64.
64.
So then it became a fad. Kids would write letters to sponsors like Atlas and Smirnoff and Harris Club and ask them for a souvenir button in the mail. One enterprising kid invented a neighborhood fan club. He said, "We have this fan club here at Seward Park in Seattle. Could you please send me 12 buttons for my members?" So the hobby just spiraled. Well, about 20 years ago, my automobile died. Completely failed. And my wife's old Buick would not have made it over the pass on our way to the Tri-Cities race. So I made a tough decision, and I started selling off my button collection, which had become probably second best in the world. But I continue to dabble in collecting and wheeler dealing and organizing flea markets and swap meets for collectors. And I've got collector friends in Madison, Detroit, Indiana, Kentucky, California, all loving hydroplanes and loving the fad of souvenir collecting.
Yeah. Well, you spoke about your flea markets, or what do you call them? The
Swap meets.
The swap meets. The swap meets. When is the next swap meet that are you organizing?
We're going to have a free open house here at the museum on Saturday, May 16th.
Okay.
And memorabilia dealers will bring their buttons, programs, photos, clothing on a buy-sell-trade endeavor. And it's absolutely free, and we don't have any off-site activities scheduled at this time.
Okay. I'll be back here at the museum on May 16th. I have some buttons to sell. So.
That's it.
So I look forward to that event. Well, that's really fun hearing about how you got started with that. And you were saying the Gale, would the Gale 4 button, that pink button, be the most valuable, you think?
Well,
out of all the hydroplane buttons?
There is a stock market. There is opinions on monetary values on this stuff.
I don't know if you knew, but Roostertail Talk has some pretty nice buttons that are getting pretty valuable now.
Oh, you betcha.
Yeah.
In the 50s, the official fuel supplier at the Seattle Gold Cup races was Mobil Gas, and their emblem was a flying red horse. And they had a gasoline sales contest. And they had 5 regions: Alaska, Eastern Washington, Western Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. And whatever independent Mobil gas station could sell the most gasoline would get a ride in Stanley Sayre's Slow-Mo 4. Wow. And they made buttons. It doesn't have a hydroplane on it, but it says Ride with Stan Sayers. And it has the Mobil Gas Flying Red Horse on it. And it is known to have sold on the eBay auctions for $5,000.
Wow, for the one button.
In the 60s, Exide Batteries sponsored winning hydroplanes.
Yeah.
And Myra Slovak and Rush Slay and Bill Brow drove Miss Exide boats. And they wanted giveaway buttons to give to the fans on the beach to promote their brand. And they found that they could order little 2-inch metal pinback buttons for about 8 cents a piece, and they could make a special plastic button, the same logo encased in diamond-shaped plastic, and they cost 60 cents a piece because of the setup fee. And they said, well, we'll order 5,000 buttons for the fans, but we'll just order 50 plastic Exides, diamond-shaped, for our crew and our families. And those buttons, the diamond plastic Exide has sold up to $3,000 to my knowledge,
Okay.
whereas the pinback button's worth $3 or $4.
Right. Yeah.
So the law of supply and demand
Yeah.
affects value.
Oh yeah.
In the 70s, a noted collector showed his photographs to the boat owners and sold them 100 photo buttons. And those include a couple of different Budweisers, a couple of different Pan Packs, Mr. Fabricator, Madison Gold Cup winner, Miss Timex, and Value Mart. And those photo buttons, having been limited to a quantity of 100 only, have achieved high value among the collector fraternity.
Well, there's some pretty valuable buttons out there. With that Gale 4 button, that pink button, I'm just curious, do you know how much that would be worth?
Well, the just plain pink Gale has sold for probably $150,
Yeah.
and sometimes 75 and sometimes 100.
Yeah.
Lee Shaneth was the czar, the commissioner.
Yeah.
After his racing days were over, he came to Seafair in the 70s with a jacket pocket full of reprinted, reordered pink Gale buttons, and he was selling them like popcorn for $50, where the collectors gather. But the painted ones with the water and the names probably sold for $1,000 to $1,500.
Yeah, that's the one you'd want right there, the custom one. I know you have a nice collection. How big would you say your collection is? How many buttons do you have in your collection?
Well, as a matter of fact, I told you earlier that I had actually had car trouble, etc., made a decision.
Yeah,
I
that's right.
sold number 2 collection, but I probably had 750 or 800 different buttons at the time. Right now, here in the museum, private collector Carl Pearson has his collection on display, and it's worth a trip if you're interested in hydroplane buttons to look at his collection, because of the scope. There's probably by now 2,000 different ones.
Wow. Yeah, we need to go out there in a little bit and take a look at that. It's a pretty impressive collection you have here. Is that probably one of the bigger collections, or do you know who has the biggest collection out there?
Well, there's a fellow down in the San Francisco Bay Area who grew up here in Seattle loving hydros. And, he married and moved suburban San Francisco, but he told me that his boat racing collection is over 10,000 pieces
Wow.
of 3-dimensional hard objects, not necessarily paper. He has pinback buttons, metal spike and gripper, hat pins, cigarette lighters, pit passes. He's got an international gallery of boat racing collectibles from Eastern Europe,
Wow.
British Isles, Mexico, Australia, Taiwan, Canada, and of course all over the U.S. And they're displayed in a box called a Riker, which collectors use for displaying anything from hydroplane buttons to butterflies to matchbooks, bottle caps, jackknives, what have you. It's kind of a standard display box in the hobby. And I've never seen his entire collection, but 10,000 pieces is pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, that'd be pretty fun.
We have friends who specialize in clothing, and they have crew uniforms from boats in the 50s, and very valuable.
Yeah. But those are fun to see every once in a while. Maybe not so much in the 50s, but I remember going to the last summer, they had a Roberto test session when the 1918 came out, and the museums, what we call that one, the Burien Oberto.
Oh boy, O'Brien.
Oh boy, Burien came out and they ran those, but there was a few people that came out and they had some retro or vintage uniforms they're wearing. And one had a really nice, I think it was like the 75 Oberto jacket or late 70s, the round nose one. And the lady had the Oberto jacket on. So it was pretty fun to see. I like seeing that stuff out there when we can. All right, Bob, I know of this thing called rot. What in the world is this? I think it's been around for a while, and I remember going, I believe there was a meeting or a party in the 90s I went to with my dad. But what is this?
4 capital letters, ROTT, the Royal Order of the Turbine, or ROT. Okay, former Channel 7 TV commentator Mike Fitzsimmons had a 3-day radio gig at Tri-Cities 32 years ago. Mm-hmm. And on a Saturday afternoon, they tried to phone for dinner reservations, and they found all the restaurants were full. They ended up in the bar at the Cosmopolitan Black Angus in Tri-Cities in the dark, listening to an off-key rock band and eating dinner. And Fitzsimmons said, "This is ridiculous. We all have friends at the races. We'll get up a crowd next year and book a banquet room." So about 30 Hydro fans had dinner together, and they had a few adult beverages and got silly and wrapped a towel around Bob Flagel's head and deemed him the grand poobah of rot. And they had secret handshakes and mascots and $2 fines and shucking and jiving, and it became a regular. So we've had a Saturday night banquet at Tri-Cities for 32 years in a row, and I'm in charge of scrounging memorabilia, and we have an auction and have raised well over $1,000 the last 4 years, and the museum is the beneficiary.
Oh, nice.
Well, one year, one of our members took a job in Antarctica, and he was gone for a year. And that's an interesting story. He was foreman for about 60 workers, and they were building a new scientific research station and remodeling an old one.
Okay.
And Mike was down under for a year, and so when he came home, we decided to get together for pizza in the winter and show him slides of what he had missed at Pasco and Seafair. Mm-hmm. And one of our ROT members said, "Gee, this is fun. Why do we just get together every summer at Tri-Cities? And a few of us see each other during the year, but why don't we do this every year?" So we've had ROT Pizza every February for 20 years. And we've had guest speakers from the sport, including such as Steve Reynolds, Scott Pierce, Steve Montgomery, Jeff Bernard, Kevin Perkins, Ron Jones Sr., Jeff Neff, Jack Berry, Jim Lucero, Jeff Campbell. This year had a delightful speech from Jim Harvey, and now I'm racking my brain, what do I do for an encore? I got to come up with a good idea for next February.
There you go.
But Jim Lucero was incredible. Man, if I could bottle Jim Lucero's memories and sell it, I'd be a wealthy man.
Oh, he's a smart man, isn't he? He's got some great stories. Well, it sounds like a really fun time. And unfortunately, I think I missed the party this month, didn't I?
You'll get a notice next year.
Next year, all right. I look forward to next year. Excellent. So you've been going 32 years strong with ROT. It's another fun way to celebrate the sport. How many members do you have in ROT?
Well, once a member, always a member. So we mail our notices of gatherings to about 130 people.
Yeah.
We have had 65 or 70 at our banquet at Tri-Cities the last couple of years. And we had about 50 people a week ago for Jim Harvey's speech.
Fun. Awesome. Well, I know you're also a member of the board here at the Hydroplane and Raceboat Museum. Could you talk a little bit more about how you help the museum with that and what you do when you get together as a board? Maybe some of the responsibilities or duties that you take care of here?
Well, back in the 80s, I was acquainted with the late Bob Williams, who was a prolific memorabilia collector. And he got the idea of forming a non-profit organization, originally called the Unlimited Hydroplane Hall of Fame and Museum. and we've later changed our name to the Hydroplane and Raceboat Museum, and we actually control and administer the Hall of Fame for unlimited hydroplanes. And I'm a fan. I'm an unprofessional career, but I drive promote membership here, and auctions at Hydro Fever, Rot, and our $100 a plate dinner, which is second Saturday in August this summer. Mm-hmm. And I put out a personal email every 2 weeks entitled Hydroplane News and Memorabilia Auction, and you always use it to highlight and promote museum activities and events. We just held the memorial radio-controlled show yesterday in memory of your dad, who was the czar of radio-controlled hydroplane building and racing. We have a suicide awareness and prevention meeting coming up on Thursday, March 5th, and we're having our annual St. Patrick's Day blast on Saturday the 14th with whiskey and beer tasting and Irish foods and live music and a mellow evening, and of course the open house Hydro Fever. And I promote the museum gift shop, the books and t-shirts and clothing that are for sale, and just generally try to be a tub thumper and promoter for the Hydroplane Museum here. If you're looking at this podcast and haven't ever been here, come on down.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of fun events going on here, especially in the off season. Not much racing on the water, so you can come down here, and there's a St. Patrick's Day party. There's a lot of other fun things you can do.
Yes, and it's always of interest to go into the back room, into the workshop, and see what's going on. Yeah. They're retrofitting the originally the Miss Lumberville, the Saviour's Mist, the hull that was used in filming Madison, the movie. It's being retrofitted, and the 1979 Squire shop is almost ready for decking. Systems are all in, hopefully be on the water by Seafair.
Yeah, cross your fingers. They got a long ways to go. Hopefully we'll see it out there.
And then, of course, the museum has had the Mahogany and Merlot event the first weekend in October at Lake Chelan. Yeah. And last year we had 11 unlimiteds and about 30 vintage limiteds and a couple dozen classic mahogany hackers and Chris crafts. That's a highlight of the year, man, I'm telling you.
That's a really fun event. I've gone the last couple of years. Had to miss a few years for financial reasons, but it was fun last year. I got to actually get my ride out there. I went on the Miss Bartle. Have you gotten a ride out there?
I am eligible for a ride if you're a museum volunteer for $200, or if you buy the driver's school package out of the gift catalog in the winter. As much as I love this and as much time and effort I've devoted to the hydroplane hobby, I'm timid. I have not desired to go 140 miles an hour in an open cockpit hydroplane. No, I've never had a ride. My wife's had 3 or 4. She loves it.
Okay, so she's gotten that pleasure. She's gotten that share of it. So that's fun. It's a great experience, and what a great way to do that down here at the Hydroplane Museum. You get every angle down here. Well, going back to the button collecting, I was curious. What do you think the height of collecting was for these buttons?
Well, I have a written list of people who still actively collect, and a written list of people who were highly involved at a time who have given away or sold their collectibles. And I would say through the 70s and 80s was a highlight. For instance, when Bill Munsey was driving for Atlas, a number of the Atlas Van Lines dealers, dealers such as Ed's, King, Shetler, Sun Van Lines, etc., they would make buttons with the same logo but different names on them. So, of course, collectors would want one of each. You could write letters and get them. The sport has evolved and changed. Back in the 70s, you had 17 boats at the pits. Now you have 8.
Right.
You had Fortune 500 sponsors. Now they seem to have gone away, and it's regional sponsors. And some of the teams have less money for giveaway pins and buttons than they used to. So I would say definitely there was a kind of a summit in collecting in the 80s. But the people that have done this for 50 and 40 years, they'll never part with them.
Right. That was fun. As I grew up in the 80s, I was born in 84, so I saw the late 80s going to the 90s and all the teams that had those giveaways and all the different buttons, and you could come away from a Seafarer Columbia Cup with bags full of stuff. That was a lot of fun as a kid, but I still enjoy going down to Seafarer, especially. They have the memorabilia corner, or what do you call that area?
Collector's Row.
Collector's Row, yes, Collector's Row. And looking through all the collections that are for sale. I'm glad to see that is continuing, because last year there was a good amount of people there selling their collections, selling different various buttons, and it's fun to look through them and see the different years and talk about the nostalgia with that.
I was trying to purchase an old collection recently, and the guy said, "No, thank you. These are my friends.
Yeah.
These buttons are my childhood memories." So there you go.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. I appreciate talking with you.
Well, why don't we go over to the Carl Pearson collection, and you can snap a couple photos.
That sounds good. Let's dig through what's out there for the public to see at the Hydroplane Museum. If you get a chance, you need to come down to the Hydroplane and Raceboat Museum to see this button collection. Carl Pearson personally donated over 2,000 buttons, which are beautifully displayed in an organized cabinet that sorts through the different boat sponsors, years, race sites, and even teams. By the way, I looked on Google, and $40 in 1964 would be worth about $350 today. Now, Bob does a monthly newsletter on hydroplane racing news and memorabilia. If you're interested in signing up to receive this, you can email Bob at bob.senior37@hotmail.com. Now, it seems like the world's shutting its doors on all events, happenings with the scare of COVID-19. On May 16th, the museum is planning on having a swap meet. I really hope this can happen on the scheduled date, because you can see a lot of great hydroplane collections and memorabilia, which you can purchase and add to your own collection. But I hope everyone out there is staying safe, practicing social distancing, washing your hands, and staying home for the time being. But along with a lot of other businesses, the museum is closed to help prevent the spread of the coronavirus. The museum runs off donations and items purchased, mainly from the visitors that come down to see the boats in person. And without the money from this, the museum would have to shut its doors. Please, if you can, donate today or purchase a shirt or program off their website to show your support. You can visit them online at thunderboats.org and tell them Roostertail Talk sent you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our episode. Make sure you come back next week to listen to our next episode. We release new episodes every Tuesday at 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button on your podcast player, as well as rate and review your experience. For more updates on Hydro News, check us out on social media. We're on the major players, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Roostertail Talk is also online with our website, www.roostertailtalk.com. On the website, you can sign up for an email subscription list to get notifications on upcoming episodes, Hydro News, podcast updates, and much, much more. Finally, this is a free podcast to all of our listeners. And if you're really enjoying your experience and want to help us to continue to grow and expand, please donate. You can find a link to donate through PayPal on our website through the support tab. So until next time, I hope to see you at the races.